good evening, wherever you're watching from. Maybe it's midnight. Maybe it's far later than you think. Tonight's story comes from the frozen north, where a lone field technician is sent to investigate strange power surges in the abandoned Alaskan town of Fort Yukon. What he finds isn't a failure in the grid, but something alive inside it. Even now, Fort Yukon still hums faintly through the northern lines. Every few months, the power spikes steady, rhythmic, like a pulse. For exactly 11 seconds, the grid whispers, "Power available, awaiting transfer." If you're still awake, like, subscribe, and keep the lights on. I've told this story a few times, and every time, people think I'm making it up. But I can still smell the diesel and frost from that night like it happened yesterday. It was a long haul up from Anchorage toward Tokitna, the kind of run I could do half asleep. Same black ribbon of road, same static on the CB, same endless dark. Only this time, something was different. The sky felt closer, heavier, pressing down on the cab. My radio had gone silent an hour before, not even static, just dead air. Then my GPS froze, stuttered, and blinked back on with new directions. Recalculating, turn right on Hollow Creek Road. I frowned. There's no Hollow Creek Road up here. Never has been. But when I passed the next bend, my headlights caught a road sign rusted, half buried in snow. Hollow Creek RD? The letters were uneven, almost hand-punched. I don't know what made me turn. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the dead silence pressing against the windows. So I eased my rig onto that narrow path, tires crunching through snow, branches scraping the trailer like skeletal hands. The headlights could barely cut 10 feet ahead, and still, the frost crept up the inside of the glass like it wanted in. A few miles in, I noticed something strange. Fresh tire tracks. Big ones, maybe another hauler's. I felt a little better knowing someone else had been through, but then I caught movement in the tree line. Something tall, shifting, keeping pace with the truck. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of light. But it stayed, there matching my speed, just far enough in the dark that I couldn't make out its shape. I slowed. It slowed. When I stopped, it stopped. Then my GPS spoke again, but not in the same voice. Gone was the soft woman's voice I'd heard for years. This one was low, flat, and male. Continue another 5 miles. You're almost home. Home. That word hit wrong. I live in Wasilla, nowhere near here. My stomach nodded, but I didn't want to risk backing an 18-wheeler down an icy one-lane in the dark. I kept driving. The forest pressed closer. Branches tapped the mirrors like fingers. The sound was thin and dry, like paper on metal dot. After a few more minutes, the road widened into an open clearing, flat, white, untouched. I parked to check my paper map. The GPS flickered again, showing my location as a little blue dot spinning in place. When I zoomed out, the map turned pure white. No towns, no roads, nothing. That's when I heard it, a horn. Low, mournful. 3 blasts, slow and spaced apart. It sounded like another truck, maybe signaling ahead. I shut off my engine and climbed out. The cold hit like a punch. The sound came again, echoing through the trees. 3 notes, deliberate, almost ritual. I turned toward my cab. My headlights flickered weakly, and through the glare, I thought I saw someone in my seat, just sitting there, watching. I ran to the door, yanked it open. It was locked. Inside, the seatbelt was buckled, still warm. The horn sounded again, closer. I turned toward the clearing's edge. 2 beams of light stared back from the dark, higher and farther apart than any truck I'd ever seen. They didn't move, just hovered there like eyes. Then they blinked. I didn't know it yet, but that blink was the last human thing I'd see for miles. The lights didn't move at first. They just hung there in the black tree line like they were watching me. I climbed back into the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine. The headlights surged weakly to life, cutting through the snow. The GPS spoke again, same flat male voice. Proceed 5 miles north. You're almost there. I felt the words in my chest more than I heard them. Static crawled through the speakers like faint breathing. I slammed the mute button, but the sound didn't stop, just dropped lower, like it had sunk under the noise of the idling engine. I threw the truck in gear and kept moving. The road ahead looked different. The trees had closed in tighter, the branches arching overhead until they formed a tunnel. My headlights bounced off east-coated trunks, reflecting my own beams back at me in dull, distorted glints. The tire tracks I'd been following vanished. I realized I was the only thing out here. A few minutes later, the CB radio crackled to life for the first time all night. I nearly jumped. Breaker 19. Anyone up north of Anchorage? Come in, I said. My voice sounded too loud in the cab. The reply came through slow, distant, and garbled. A man's voice hoarse, deliberate. Turn around. Then silence. I froze, waiting for it to repeat. But all I heard was wind pressing against the doors. I tried again. Nothing. The voice didn't come back. When the GPS recalculated again, the display glitched, white static lines cutting across the screen. It showed my position looping endlessly in a figure 8. The voice returned, faint, like it was coming from somewhere inside the dash itself. You're almost home. That word again. The steering wheel felt heavier now, like I was fighting the road itself. My speedometer needle jumped erratically, swinging from 0 to 70 even though I barely touched the gas. The road began to slope downhill, gentle at first, then sharper. The trees thinned, and I saw faint movement up ahead, what looked like taillights disappearing around a curved dot. Another truck. Relief hit me like caffeine. I leaned into the horn. 2 sharp blasts. The lights slowed. I caught up enough to see the outline of a semi, same model as mine, even the same blue cab. I flashed my brights. The other truck didn't react. Its lights flickered, dimmed, and then went completely out as it turned a bend. I followed. The bend opened into another clearing, almost identical to the one before, but this time the snow was littered with deep grooves, tire marks, circling in and out, crossing each other. I stopped the truck, stepping out again with my flashlight. The air felt wrong, like being underwater. My boots sank into a mix of slush and oil. I crouched down and realized what I was standing in wasn't oil. It was frozen blood, thick and black, pooled beneath the snow. Something moved behind me, a crunch of snow, deliberate and slow. I spun around. My flashlight flickered, catching only empty air and the faint steam of my own breath. The crunching stopped, replaced by that low horn again. 3 blasts. Closer this time. I turned back, toward my rig. My headlights had gone out completely. In their place, 2 faint white orbs hung above the hood, blinking, almost in rhythm with my pulse. My truck door creaked open by itself, though the key was still in my pocket. Inside, the CB hissed again, then spoke not through static this time, but clearly, as if someone were sitting right beside me. Almost there. You can see it now. The windshield fogged from the inside, letters forming in the condensation, written backward from the outside. Turn around. I wiped it away with my sleeve and froze. Through the glass, I saw another truck idling just behind mine. Identical. Same license plate. Same dent on the fender. But its cab lights were on. And through the window, I saw myself sitting inside it. I blinked once, and the other me blinked back, just a half-second late. I couldn't breathe for a full 5 seconds. That other truck idled behind mine, exhaust rolling out in slow, steady bursts that fogged the mirrors. It looked real solid metal, headlights humming, cab lights flickering, and inside, through the windshield, was me. My same jacket, same gloves, even the same coffee thermos sitting in the cuff holder, except the figure wasn't moving right. Every breath looked delayed, like a bad reflection with lag. I stumbled back through the snow, slipping on the frozen mix of blood and ice. The other me turned its head, slow and mechanical, until it was staring directly at me through the glass. Its mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then the CB in my own truck came alive again. The same low male voice filled the cab, but this time, it wasn't from the GPS. "You took the wrong road." The other truck's headlights flared white so bright I had to cover my eyes. When I lowered my arm, it was gone. No sound, no tracks, no smell of diesel. Just me standing alone in that clearing. Heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I climbed back into my rig and slammed the door. The cab felt smaller now, like the air had thickened. I turned the engine, coughed, caught, then sputtered out. "Dead." The radio buzzed, faint voices whispering under static. Words I couldn't make out. I hit the emergency lights, but nothing came on. My phone was useless, no service, no time display. Just the home screen frozen on 3:12 a.m. outside. The forest was silent. No wind, no snow falling, just a dead stillness pressing against every surface. I thought about sleeping in the cab until morning, but when I looked out the side mirror, I saw a faint motion behind the truck. Something tall, moving along the trailer's length, one slow step at a time. I gripped the door handle and froze. The metal was warm, warmer than my own skin. I could feel something pulsing faintly through it, like a heartbeat. Then the CB hissed again, 3 sharp clicks, then breathing. A man's breath, slow and wet. "Who is this?" I said, my voice shaking. No answer. "Just breathing. Then look behind you." I turned. Nothing there. Then the rear door of my trailer slammed shut hard enough to rattle the cab. I jumped out, flashlight trembling in my hand, boots crunching through the snow as I circled around. The latch was still in place, untouched, but on the back door, someone had scrawled a line through the frost. Nitrogen monoxide. That's when I noticed something else, my own footprints in the snow. They didn't lead from the cab to the trailer. They led from the woods. Every hair on my arm stood up. I started back toward the cab, but the headlights blinked twice, then twice again. A pattern. I climbed in, slamming the door, locking it, fumbling the ignition again. The GPS lit up by itself. No map, no roads, no text. Just a blue dot spinning in a white void. The male voice came back one last time. "Welcome home." The engine roared to life by itself. The truck shifted into drive without me touching the gear. The steering wheel began to turn, guiding itself back down that narrow white road. I yanked the parking brake, stomped the clutch. Nothing. The rig moved on its own, slow but steady, down the hill. The headlights illuminated the same trees, same bends, repeating over and over like a loop. I tried jumping out. The door wouldn't open. I pounded it, screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the hum of the engine. The windshield started fogging from the outside this time. Words forming again, backward, barely visible through the frost. "Don't leave." The GPS blinked once more. The white screen turned black, then showed coordinates I didn't recognize. Beneath them, a single word appeared, Tikitna, and then, the voice fainter now, almost gentle. "You made it." That's the last thing I remember. They found my truck 2 days later, parked on a closed service road with the engine idling. The GPS still looping the same phrase. "Proceed 5 miles north. You're almost there." No one ever found my body, but sometimes, when truckers take that stretch north of Anchorage on a clear night, they say their GPS briefly recalculates, shows a turn for Hollow Creek Road, and if they ignore it, a voice still comes through the radio, low and patient. "You're almost home." Some roads never lead back. They just wait for another driver to take the wrong turn. I worked the night shift at a weather outpost, about 40 miles north of Nome. Nothing fancy. Just a prefab building with a single radar dome, a backup generator, and 3 months' worth of canned food. Most nights were the same. Check atmospheric readings, send data, drink coffee until the sun returned for its brief, bitter hour of daylight. You start thinking the wind is talking to you after a few weeks out there. You start listening. That night started like any other. The sky was clear, the stars sharp and frozen, and the aurora barely whispering above the horizon. Around 2 a.m., my instruments began acting up, temperature readings bouncing, barometric pressure dropping, then spiking again like a heartbeat. I assumed it was a software glitch, maybe ice on the sensors. I went out to check, bundled in 3 layers. Flashlight cutting a weak cone through the endless white. The cold was brutal, the kind that grinds against your teeth. My breath turned solid almost instantly. The wind had stopped, which was wrong in itself. I reached the sensor pole and saw it vibrating, not from wind, but like something beneath the ground was pushing upward. That's when I saw the lights. They rose from behind the ridge, 3 of them, bright and white, but not like aircraft lights. They didn't blink. They moved in perfect synchronization, slow at first, then rising fast into the low clouds before stopping dead. Not a drift, not a hover, a stop, like gravity forgot them. I stood there until my eyelashes froze together. Then my radio crackled to life with static. A voice came through, muffled and distant. "Do you see them?" I froze. The transmission was on our internal channel, the one that only connected to other weather stations. But there were no other texts scheduled in a 100-mile radius. "Who is this?" I said, my voice shaking. Silence. Then the same voice again, but clearer this time. "Keep watching." I should have gone back inside, but curiosity has a way of overpowering fear when you work in isolation. The lights began to descend again, this time in a slow spiral, like they were scanning the ground. My flashlight flickered, and the snow under my boots started to hum, not audibly but through vibration, like static crawling up through my legs. I took a step back, and the nearest light froze mid-air. Then it began drifting toward me, slow, deliberate. My radio went dead. The hum grew stronger until it drowned out everything else. I ran for the building, tripping once, knees slamming into packed ice. When I got back inside, the instruments were going crazy, temperature dropping 20 degrees per second. Wind readings at 0 even though the walls were shaking. I tried hailing the Anchorage office, but all I got was feedback, a single high tone that rose higher and higher until it became a whistle. Then, abruptly, everything stopped. The screens went black. The generator cut out. The hum outside ceased completely. In the dark, I could still see the light through the frosted window. It hovered maybe 20 yards away, pulsing faintly. Every pulse made my chest tighten. My reflection in the glass seemed delayed, like the light was distorting time between blinks. Then I noticed something impossible. The reflection behind me moved before I did. It lifted its hand toward the window. My own arm stayed still. I turned around. No one was there, but the air in the room shimmered faintly, like heat distortion. The temperature gauged at a moment ago flashed once more before the system shut down again. It showed -97 degrees Fahrenheit, then went blank. Outside, the lights began moving again, spreading apart, forming a perfect triangle above the outpost. I grabbed the radio and whispered into it, without knowing why. "I see them." The reply came instantly. "Good. Keep watching." And then the voice added, almost softly, "They're watching back." When I blinked, one of the lights had vanished, but the reflection of it stayed right where it was. When I woke the next morning, the generator was still dead. My wristwatch had stopped at 3:17 a.m., and every digital clock in the station showed the same time. The silence outside was absolute. No wind, no creaking metal, not even the usual shift of snow on the roof. It was as if sound itself had frozen overnight. I tried to rationalize. Power failure, atmospheric interference, fatigue. But the memory of that light still pulsed behind my eyes. I brewed what was left of the instant coffee using a hand warmer and checked the sensors manually. Every cable was intact, but all the readings were nonsense negative temperatures that didn't exist in the troposphere. Humidity above 100%. Air pressure so low, it should have collapsed the building. I decided to hike the half-mile to the secondary tower. The wind picked up as soon as I stepped outside, but it wasn't moving in gusts. It pulsed. The snow lifted in rhythmic waves, like it was breathing. When I reached the ridge, I saw something metallic sticking out of the ice, an object that hadn't been there before. It was round, smooth, about the size of a satellite dish, but with no seams or bolts. When I got closer, I realized it wasn't reflecting light, it was emitting it. A dull white glow seeped from the surface like moonlight through skin. I crouched, reached out with my glove, and the second I touched it, my earpiece came alive with static. Do you see it? The same voice from last night. .com, flat, mechanical. Identify yourself, I said. My voice shook. This is Outpost Delta 3. Who's transmitting? No answer. Just a faint sound under the static like breathing. Then the voice returned. It's under the ice. Don't let it see you. My skin crawled. I stumbled backward, eyes locked on the glowing object. The snow around it had started to melt in a perfect circle. I ran back toward the station. Halfway there, the wind stopped again dead. Instant silence. My footsteps were the only sound, dull thuds swallowed by the fog dot inside. The air smelled wrong, like ozone after lightning. The monitors were back on, flickering with static images. Every screen displayed the same thing. Live thermal footage from outside. Centered on me, except the feed wasn't delayed, was ahead by a few seconds. I moved my hand, and the version of me on the screen moved before I did. That's when I saw another shape appear beside me on the feed. Tall, narrow, faceless. It stood where the door should have been. I spun around. Nothing. The door was closed. The metal latch was iced over from the inside. The radio clicked once. You shouldn't have touched it. I slammed the switch off, ripped the cord out. The sound didn't stop. The voice wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was in the room, behind me, muffled like someone speaking through thick glass. I turned slowly. The window was glowing faintly again. 3 lights hovering in a triangle, just above the ridge, perfectly still. The reflection of the room shimmered across the glass, and for a second, I saw a man standing behind me in the reflection tall, wearing my same parka, same hood. But his face was blurred, features running like paint underwater. He lifted a hand, palm outward. I froze. On his glove, a dark patch spread in, identical handprint, glowing faintly. I pulled the hood back. My own glove was clean. Then every light in the building cut out again. Only the external cameras stayed active, displaying that impossible triangle of lights, now rotating slowly, methodically like scanning the ground. The hum came back, louder this time. I could feel it inside my teeth. My instruments began flickering random symbols, the software spitting lines of gibberish that almost looked like words. One phrase repeated over and over. Stay below. The ground vibrated once, a deep, low groan, like ice shifting far beneath the surface. A single hairline crack ran across the floor from wall to wall. Then the radio spoke again. Final. It's awake. The next pulse of light came from under the floor, not the sky. I didn't move for a full minute after the voice said that. The hum had turned into a deep vibration, not loud, but felt, rolling through the floor and into my bones. The crack that had split the station floor began spreading slow, deliberate, like something breathing just under the concrete. I grabbed my parka and the emergency recorder, thinking maybe I could at least get this on tape, prove something was happening. The air was thick, heavy with static. When I spoke into the recorder, my own voice came back distorted, like it was being played backward in real time. Outside, the sky had changed. The 3 lights were gone, replaced by a faint white haze that stretched from horizon to horizon. The snow glowed faintly, pulsing in sync with the vibration under my feet. I stepped outside, the cold slamming into me like a wall, and immediately saw that the ice field below the ridge wasn't solid anymore. It was moving slow, waves rolling outward from the center of the valley, as if something beneath the surface were turning over. I started toward the radio tower. Halfway there, my headset crackled again. "You're above it." The same calm, flat voice. "Who are you?" I shouted. "What's happening?" No reply, just static. That almost sounded like whispering. When I reached the tower, I saw more of those metallic shapes breaking through the ice, glowing from within. Not one this time, dozens. The light wasn't steady anymore. It pulsed in a rhythm, like a signal. Each pulse hit me in the chest, a low thump that made my vision flicker at the edges. I couldn't tell if it was sound or something else, something deeper. Then, from the base of the ridge, I saw movement. A figure climbed up through the fog, same height, same clothes, same gait as me. The closer it came, the clearer it got. I could see my own patch on the parka, the same frayed cuff, even the same crack in my goggles. It stopped about 20 feet away and tilted its head like it was studying me. Then my radio buzzed again, but the voice wasn't the calm one. This time it was my own voice, delayed and warbling through static. "Go inside." The double raised its hand. I mirrored it without meaning to. Its movement was a fraction of a second early. I tried to speak, but my throat locked up. The snow between us began to ripple, light spreading outward from its boots like heat. When it opened its mouth, the same hum poured out, not air, not sound, just vibration. My teeth ached. My knees buckled. The lights behind it brightened until I couldn't see. When I came to, I was back inside the station, lying on the floor. The crack was gone. The instruments were off. My watch now reads 6:42 a.m. 3 hours gone. Through the window, the valley was calm again. No lights, no fog, no sound, just endless white. I turned on the recorder. Static, then faint breathing, and under that, a second layer of voice that wasn't mine whispering in rhythm with my own speech. "Keep watching." I stumbled outside, desperate for any sign of what had happened. The snow was smooth. Not even my own footprints remained. The ridge looked untouched, but something in the air felt different, warmer somehow, thicker, almost alive. When I looked up, I saw faint trails in the sky, like contrails but moving in impossible directions, crossing, spiraling, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. They glowed faintly even against daylight. I radioed Anchorage again. Nothing but static. Then, faintly, beneath the static, I heard myself. My own transmission from the night before. "Do you see them?" My blood ran cold. I checked the transmitter logs. The playback was real-time, stamped from exactly 2:03 a.m. when I'd first heard that question. I hadn't imagined it. But if I was the one who said it, who had been answering me, that's when I noticed something on the ice field below. Tiny black dots, evenly spaced, arranged in the same triangular pattern the lights had formed. I zoomed in through the binoculars. They weren't holes. They were symbols, perfectly carved into the ice. The wind finally returned, soft but steady. It carried something faint, almost like a whisper in the white distance. "We're still watching." I stayed at the station another 6 hours before a snowcat arrived from Nome to pick me up. The man driving said the call came in from my 2 days earlier. I checked the dispatch record later. The transmission he received wasn't my voice. It was identical, but the message had only 4 words. "The sky is open." The strangest part, when we drove away, I looked back at the ridge and saw another me standing on the tower, still watching the lights. When they offered me the off-season caretaker job at Eklatna Lake Resort, I didn't hesitate. I'd been out of work since September, and the thought of quiet months in the woods, no people, No traffic, no questions, sounded perfect. The owners closed for winter each year, and my only duty was to keep the cabins from freezing solid and make sure the generator stayed alive through the cold. There were 12 cabins in total, arranged in a semicircle around the frozen lake. Most were boarded up, but cabin 8 was different. It stayed unlocked for maintenance reasons, the owner said. They never explained what that meant. When I arrived in early November, snow was already knee. I had a radio, a half-working plow, and a wood stove that smoked more than it heated. The first week was peaceful. I'd wake to the sound of wind cutting through the trees, shovel out the paths, check the generator, and fall asleep with the kind of exhaustion that only cold air can give. But on the 8th night, I heard something that didn't belong. Knocking, not the sharp crack of ice shifting, but deliberate knocks, 3 in a row, coming from cabin 8. I told myself it was just the wood contracting in the cold. The sound carried strange over the frozen lake. But the next morning, I noticed boot prints barely visible. A single set leading from the tree line straight to the cabin door, not away. I followed them halfway before they disappeared under fresh snow. The door to cabin 8 was slightly open. Inside was dark, colder than outside. My breath hit the air like smoke from a dying match. The cabin was empty, dust thick on every surface. A cot, a rusted stove, an old mirror hanging crooked on the wall. But something felt wrong. The air carried a faint rot, like thawed meat. I shut the door and nailed it closed. That night, the generator failed. The entire resort went dark. I went out to reset it, with a flashlight. The world so quiet that my own breathing sounded too loud. The lake groaned under its ice low, deep, like the earth moving in its sleep. When the lights came back on, I turned toward the cabins to check the line. Cabin 8's porch light was on. I hadn't touched its switch since I arrived. I trudged through the snow, boots crunching in the silence. The light above the door flickered faintly. The nails I'd driven into the door were still in place, but the door was open again. I shone my flashlight inside. The mirror on the far wall reflected my beam, and for a second, I thought I saw someone standing behind me. A man, tall and gaunt, wearing the same maintenance jacket I had on. But when I turned, no one was there. The mirror still showed him, though. He stood in the reflection, closer now, staring through me with sunken eyes. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out, just the faint rattle of breath, like wind through a pipe. Then the light bulb above me burst. Glass rained down across the snow, and the world went dark. When I looked back, the mirror was empty. My flashlight flickered once, then steadied. The door swung shut on its own, the lock clicking into place. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the cabin made my pulse jump. Around 3 a.m., the radio crackled alive on its own frequency, faint static, followed by a whisper. He never left. I froze, staring at the device. The voice came again, hoarse, quiet, almost pleading. Cabin 8, don't open it again. I unplugged the radio and threw it outside into the snow. But when I checked in the morning, it was gone. Only a single trail of boot prints led from my cabin toward the lake. They stopped halfway across the ice. That night, I dreamed someone was knocking a gnome. This time, it was from inside my cabin. The knocking didn't stop after that night. It came again the next evening, 3 short knocks, always at the same hour, just after the generator cycled. I'd taken to sitting up late with the stove roaring and the radio off, pretending I couldn't hear it. But you can't ignore sound in that kind of silence. It cuts through everything. On the 10th night, I grabbed my flashlight and jacket and decided to face it. If it was a loose board or an animal, I'd fix it and finally sleep. The snow was coming down hard, stinging my face, wind curling off the lake like knives. The whole world had gone white, except for that faint yellow glow leaking from cabin 8's porch. I trudged up the path. The nails I'd driven into the door 2 nights ago were gone, completely gone. Not pulled or bent. Missing the wood around the holes was smooth, as if they'd melted out. The door hung slightly open. I should have turned around, but instead, I pushed it open and stepped inside. The air hit me like walking into a freezer. Frost glittered on the walls. The mirror hung perfectly straight now, reflecting the weak beam of my flashlight. I looked around. Nothing had moved, except the cot. It was unmade. The blanket was still warm. A faint drip echoed from somewhere behind the stove. I followed the sound to the corner. There, half frozen into the floor, was a small puddle of water. No, not water, melted snow. Footprints led from the puddle straight toward the mirror. My reflection looked wrong. The light hit my face unevenly, but that wasn't it. My reflection's breath didn't fog. I reached out to wipe the mirror's surface, and my gloved hand hit something soft instead of cold glass-like wet fabric. My own reflection's hand was still raised, frozen mid-motion. Then its mouth twitched. I stumbled backward, the flashlight slipping from my grip. It rolled across the floor and landed against the cot, its beam illuminating something wedged between the mattress and frame, a folded piece of paper, water-stained and brittle. I picked it up carefully, unfolding it under the light. If you're reading this, don't stay past the first thaw. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, signed only with one word, Raymond. I recognized the name. Raymond Niles, the last caretaker before me. He'd gone missing 2 winters ago. They said he probably fell through the lake ice. The floorboards creaked behind me, not settling, shifting under weight. I turned slowly, every muscle screaming not to. The mirror shimmered faintly in the dim light. My reflection was still there, but I wasn't moving. Then it smiled. I backed away until my shoulders hit the doorframe. The air in the room pulsed with quiet vibration, like the faint hum of wires underground. The reflection's head tilted to the side. Mine didn't. When I lunged for the door, it slammed shut on its own. Something whispered from behind the glass, too quiet to understand, but I could feel the words pressing against my ears from inside my skull. I grabbed the latch and yanked hard until it broke free. The moment I stepped outside, the sound stopped. No wind, no whisper, no hum, just the soft hiss of snow. I ran back to my cabin, slammed the door, and shoved the dresser in front of it. I didn't light the stove that night. I just sat in the dark, staring at the window. At some point, exhaustion must have taken me, because I woke to light seeping through the blinds. For the first time in days, the air felt still. I almost believed it was over until I saw what was outside my window. Someone had drawn a shape in the snow, perfectly symmetrical, right where my footprints ended. It was the outline of a door. Inside the outline, a single word, carved deep with a stick or a knife, open. The mirror from cabin 8 was leaning against my porch railing. When I caught my reflection in it, I realized it wasn't copying me anymore. It was waiting. By the time the sun went down again, I knew I couldn't stay another night. Something about that mirror, about the thing inside it, was closing in. The reflection followed me wherever I moved. Not literally, not in glass or metal, but in feeling. I'd catch glimpses of myself in the window, in the chrome of the stove, even in the frozen water by the lake's edge. Every time, my reflection stood a little closer than it should. I packed my things before dark. The plow wouldn't start, but I still had the snowmobile. If I left before the storm hit, I could make it back to the main road before dawn. I loaded a few essentials, flashlight, food, the note I'd found from Raymond Dan, stepped outside. The mirror was gone. Only an empty imprint in the snow remained where it had leaned that morning. The trail of disturbed powder led straight toward cabin 8. The door was wide open, swaying gently in the wind. I tried to ignore it. I really did. I turned the ignition on the snowmobile, but the engine coughed once and died. The key snapped off clean in the slot. I didn't even curse. Just stared at the broken metal in my glove. hearing the low groan of the lake ice echo through the valley. Something moved in the doorway of cabin 8, a shadow. Slow, deliberate. The porch light flickered to life by itself, yellow and weak. The figure in the doorway looked like me, but it wasn't wearing my parka. Its face was pale, gray eyes too hollow. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. It raised its arm and beckoned once. The rational part of me tried to find excuses, a trick of light, reflection on the frost, exhaustion. But deep down, I already knew. Raymond's note hadn't been a warning, it was a confession. He hadn't left at all. I took one step forward, then another. The cold burned through my jacket. My breath came out in short bursts, crystallizing mid-air. The shadow in the doorway turned and vanished into the dark dot. Inside, cabin 8 looked different. The stove was glowing faintly red, and the air smelled like wet iron. The mirror hung dead center on the opposite wall. It wasn't dusty or cracked anymore, it was pristine, like new glass. I approached slowly. My reflection stood there, but behind it, I saw movement. The faint outline of another figure standing farther back in the glass, almost hidden by fog. A handprint pressed from the inside, smearing faintly against the surface. Then the mirror began to breathe, slow and steady. Frost spread from its edges toward the center with every exhale. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut, shaking the walls. The light bulb above the stove flared white, then burst, plunging everything into blue darkness. I hit the wall switch over and over. Nothing. The only illumination came from the mirror, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat, and in that faint light, I saw them. Not one reflection, but many layered one behind another, faces half seen through fog. Some I didn't recognize. Others looked disturbingly familiar. Caretakers before me. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering something I couldn't quite catch. I screamed. The sound didn't come out. My breath froze in the air. A hand reached from the glass-thin gray, wrong end pressed against my chest. The cold hit me so hard I couldn't move. My body felt hollowed out, like something was pulling my weight from the inside. When it let go, I fell backward into the cot, shaking uncontrollably. The mirror went dark. The whispering stopped. Outside, the storm began again, howling through the trees. I stumbled to the door and threw it open, gasping for air. The snow was falling sideways. Through the blur of white, I saw movement, someone running toward the lake. I recognized the jacket. My jacket? I followed, calling out, but the wind shredded my voice. The figure reached the lake's edge and didn't stop. It ran straight across the ice, each step leaving no footprints. Halfway across, it turned to look at me. Same face, same eyes. Then the ice gave way. The surface folded inward with a single, cracking sound, and the figure sank silently beneath. I ran until my lungs burned, dropped to my knees at the hole's edge, peered down into the dark water and saw my own face staring back. But it wasn't drowned. It was smiling. The next morning, rescue teams found cabin 8 empty. They said the last caretaker must have fallen through the lake while trying to clear ice near the docks. They never found the body. Cabin 8 has been boarded up again. But locals swear they still hear knocking when the ice shifts. 3 short raps, always at night, and sometimes, on clear mornings when the lake freezes glass. There's a reflection in the water, someone standing at the door, waiting for it to open. Some jobs don't end when you leave. They end when the next caretaker takes your place. If you ever worked night shifts in a dead TV station, you know how silence can start to sound alive. Channel 19 Anchorage used to be local news and weather, but by the time I was hired, it was little more than a repeater for regional ads and reruns. Most of the crew had been laid off. Just me, the transmit rack, and a coffee machine that spat brown water. My job was simple: keep the transmitter online. monitor feed health, and log outages. That winter, the signal kept dropping between 2 and 3 a.m. every night. At first, I blamed it on interference or ice on the dish. But then the logs started showing something impossible. During those dropouts, another signal was overriding ours. Not static, not dead air, a feed. The first time it happened, I was half asleep at the console. The monitor flickered, the usual ad loop cut off, and the image shifted to a shaky handheld shot of an empty newsroom. Same building, same layout, except the old Channel 19 logo was on the back wall, one they'd retired years before. I even worked there. I thought maybe it was an archived tape looping through by mistake, but when I checked the file directory, the timestamp said live feed, unknown source. I stared at the monitor. In the center of the frame, a news desk sat empty, papers scattered. The shot jittered slightly, like whoever was filming was breathing hard. Then, faint audio whined, muffled voices. A hum in the background like feedback bleeding through metal. I muted it and ran diagnostics. No source ping? No broadcast address? Our transmitter was receiving a signal that didn't exist in the database. I called the regional tech in Vasilla, but he didn't pick up. I left a voicemail, laughed about Channel 19 ghosts, and told myself I'd check it in the morning. But I didn't sleep. At 2:47 a.m., the feed came back on its own. This time the camera had moved closer to the desk. A faint figure stood behind it, motionless. The room was dim, lit only by a single flickering light overhead. I leaned forward, squinting. The figure wasn't facing the camera. Its head was tilted down, like it was reading. I raised the volume slightly. The hum was louder now, electric vibration that crawled under the skin. The speakers popped, and a voice whispered through the static. "Can you hear me?" I froze. The voice was close, not broadcast distance close, like someone whispering into a live mic behind me. I spun around. The control room was empty. When I turned back, the figure on screen had lifted its head. Its face was blurred, washed out by glare, but the mouth moved again. Synced perfectly with what I heard next this time, not from the speaker, but from the intercom on my desk. "You're late." My skin went cold. I killed the monitor feed, yanked the main breaker to the transmitter, and waited for silence. The room went dark, except for the soft glow of the emergency exit sign. Then every monitor turned back on, no power, no signal source, yet each screen flickered to life, showing static that slowly resolved into the same newsroom shot, only now the camera was facing the control booth. I could see myself, sitting exactly where I was, staring back through the glass. I backed away until my chair hit the wall. The image followed, zooming in. My doppelganger on the screen leaned forward, face still obscured, motion echoing mine a split second late. The hum deepened, like a pressure in the air. And then the words appeared in white text across the bottom of every monitor. Like a live news ticker, Channel 19 returns to live coverage. Reached for the main switch again, but my hands were shaking too hard. I finally tore the power cables out of the wall. The monitors died, the hum vanished, and the silence came crashing back. I sat there for hours, waiting for sunrise. When I checked the system logs the next morning, the footage wasn't saved. No entries, no feed history, no anomaly reports, but the logs did show one change. A new scheduled program had been added to the nightly broadcast lineup. Airtime, 2:47 a.m. Program title, Live Return. That night, the cameras in the newsroom turned on by themselves, pointed not at the desk, but straight at the control room. The next night, I told myself I wasn't going to watch. I'd unplugged half the monitors, disabled every remote stream, even locked the broadcast suite door. But you can't unhear that hum once you've heard it. It stays in your teeth, like the echo of a live wire. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the room went dark again. Every power line to the transmitter surged and dropped simultaneously. The emergency lights flickered. Then the intercom clicked on by itself, and that same static hiss filled the booth. I didn't look at the monitors. I just sat there, hands over my ears, whispering, "Not real, not real." Then I heard the voice again, clearer this time. "You're on in 3, 2. Every monitor lit up at once. The newsroom was back on screen, identical to before. But this time, the camera angle was wider, showing the whole studio. The old Channel 19 set looked exactly as it had in archived photos, same wooden desk, same cheap carpeting, except everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, like no one had entered for years. I could see the teleprompter scrolling, gibberish text characters flashing too quickly to read. Behind the desk stood the same blurred figure, now facing the camera. It tilted its head, like it was waiting for a cue. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I shouldn't have answered, but isolation does strange things to your sense of reason. "Channel 19, I said, half joking, trying to steady my voice. The line hissed. Then the same whispering tone as before came through. "You're late for your segment." I hung up instantly. When I turned back, one of the monitors had switched to a feed of the control booth itself live, from a new angle. The camera must have been inside the room. I hadn't set one up. The image showed me standing there, phone still in hand. Only the version on screen wasn't moving right. His head twitched in tiny, unnatural jerks, his eyes too bright. Like the whites had been overexposed, stared at something just above the lens, and then he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It spread too far, pulling at the skin until it looked carved. My reflection on screen raised a hand and waved, slow and deliberate. I didn't move. I bolted for the breaker again, flipping every switch. Power cut instantly. The monitors went black except one. The central feed still glowed faintly, powered by nothing. The words at the bottom scrolled again, this time slower, deliberate, in red text. "Live feed accepted. Studio return complete." Something clicked behind me, metal, heavy, mechanical. The broadcast camera in the corner, the one I hadn't used in months, turned on by itself. The red tally light blinked once. Then the speaker above my head came alive. "Smile for the audience." I threw the nearest chair at the camera, shattering the lens. The light stayed on. The hum returned, deeper this time, vibrating through the floor and the metal racks. My teeth chattered uncontrollably. Through the control room window, I saw motion on the newsroom side. The blurred figure wasn't alone anymore. Another silhouette had joined it, taller, broader shoulders, head down. Both stood perfectly still, facing the glass. I couldn't take it. I ran downstairs to the maintenance level, grabbed a flashlight, and cut power at the main junction. The whole building died. No hum, no light, nothing. The silence was like a physical weight pressing against my ears. When I came back up, the newsroom was dark again, but the glass between us reflected something strange. Instead of my flashlight beam, I saw bright white studio lights on my side of the glass, lights that weren't really there. For a moment, I thought I could hear faint applause. That's when the red tally light blinked again from the ruined camera. I leaned in close, whispering, "Who's watching this?" The static on the nearest monitor snapped into a live feed of my face, real time, no delay. My voice echoed back, warped, "You are." The screen cut to black. I didn't go home. I slept in my car outside the station with the engine running, watching the tower lights blink in the dark. Every time they did, I thought I saw another flash between them, like a signal being sent back. When I checked the next day's schedule, my name had been added to the broadcast lineup listed under Anchor. I tried to quit the next morning, packed my tools, my access badge, even wiped my login credentials. When I called the regional office to explain, the woman on the other end interrupted halfway through. "Who is this?" she asked. I gave my name. There was a pause long enough for me to hear her breathing through the line. "We don't have anyone by that name on payroll," she said. Channel 19's been shut down since 2018. My stomach dropped. I laughed it off, said she must be mistaken. But the more I argued, the more certain she sounded. When I finally hung up, I realized my employee ID had a different number on it, one I didn't recognize. I drove back to the station, just to prove to myself it existed. The parking lot was half buried in snow. The sign above the entrance was gone. Bolts rusted into the concrete. Inside, the hallway lights were dead, the air cold and stale like a sealed basement. My footprints from last night were still in the dust, but the control room door was open. Every monitor inside was on again, all of them broadcasting the same frozen image. The empty newsroom, lit by a single overhead bulb. At the bottom of the screen, a text ticker scrolled. Anchorage broadcast returns tonight. Live coverage begins at 2:47 a.m. The timestamp on the monitor said 2:43, 4 minutes. I backed toward the door, heart hammering. The feed flickered once, then the camera zoomed in automatically on the anchor's desk. The figure was there again, same blurred face, same slumped posture. But now a second chair had been added beside it. A name card rested on the desk in front of that chair. Even from where I stood, I could read it. Engineer. The intercom popped. Take your seat. I ran. The hallway lights flickered on as I passed, one after another, like something chasing the power surge behind me. I hit the stairwell, but the lower doors were locked. Every turn brought me back toward the newsroom. Somehow, every hallway ended in glass, and through that glass, the broadcast feed followed, always showing me from another angle. I slammed through the newsroom door finally, breath fogging in the cold. The air was thick with dust and static. Every monitor on the far wall showed a different view of the same room, some live, some slightly delayed. The main camera on its tripod turned with a slow, mechanical whine until it faced me directly. The tally light blinked red. We're live. The blurred anchor turned its head. Slowly, the face was clearer now. Not featureless anymore, just wrong. Like someone had built it from memory, but stopped halfway through. The mouth opened slightly. Read the copy. On the desk, a teleprompter lit up. The words scrolled in that same broken gibberish at first, then shifted into English. Stay on the air. Don't stop the feed. My reflection appeared in the camera lens, pale, shaking. The voice came again, but it didn't come from the figure. It came from the monitors behind me, every screen layered with my own face, mouth moving a split second behind. We need you. The lights in the room brightened. The dust lifted, hanging in midair like smoke. Every sound faded until the only thing left was the hum, low and steady, like the station itself was breathing. The blurred figure rose from the desk and began walking toward me, each footstep echoing through the speakers as though broadcast in real time. I backed up until I hit the wall. The camera kept rolling, zooming closer, the lens clicking softly. I remember shouting at the monitors, at the walls, at the dead station, who's watching this? The answer came through the intercom, layered in hundreds of overlapping voices. You are. The light went white. When I woke up, it was daylight. The newsroom was spotless. Every monitor was off. The equipment was cold to the touch, like it hadn't run in years. I walked outside, disoriented, half expecting to see my car gone. It was still there, but the plates weren't mine. That night, I couldn't resist checking the television in my motel room. Channel 19 was broadcasting again. The screen showed an empty newsroom, same set, same camera angle. The ticker at the bottom scrolled. Anchorage broadcast live coverage with your host. Then the camera panned left. I was sitting at the desk, smiling, reading from the teleprompter. The strangest part, I could still hear the hum behind the motel wall, steady, alive, waiting for the next broadcast. When you write about travel for a living, you learn how to fake bravery. I'd backpacked through ice storms, slept in strangers' barns, even climbed Denali's lower ridges for a story. But nothing unnerves me like the silence of Alaskan wilderness after sundown, when the air itself feels like it's listening. Last September, I joined 3 other hikers to document an old mining trail in Hatcher Pass. Locals said it had been closed since the 1980s, when a prospector went missing. The State Park Department denied it ever existed, which of course made it perfect for my Lost Trails of Alaska series. Our group was small: me, Eric, a guide, Rachel, a geology grad student, and Nolan, a photographer who thought horror stories were just clickbait. We started early, trekking up the old gravel road until it disappeared under the alpine brush. GPS showed faint elevation data, but no mapped path. Every so often we'd find old timber pegs and rusted cable, remnants of a mining tram that once ran or down the mountain. The first day was uneventful until dusk. We set up camp near a frozen stream and lit a small fire. Around 9 p.m., Rachel noticed movement on the ridge above us. Light flickers, like someone waving a lantern. We assumed another group was nearby, but the light didn't move naturally. It swayed back and forth at an even rhythm, slow and hypnotic, then blinked out completely. Eric shrugged it off as headlamps or reflection. I agreed out loud, but something about it unsettled me. It had moved with the wind instead of against it. Later that night, I woke to footsteps crunching outside my tent. I unzipped the flap just enough to peek. Our campfire had burned down to embers, and through the dim red glow I saw Eric standing perfectly still, facing the woods. "Eric," I whispered. He didn't respond. His head turned slightly, and the faint firelight caught his face. His eyes were open, but unfocused, mouth hanging slack like he was listening to something. Then he walked forward, straight into the tree line. I scrambled out of the tent, calling after him, but my voice felt muffled. Nolan and Rachel emerged behind me, blinking in confusion. We followed Eric's boot tracks about 50 yards before they stopped. Not faded stopped. The last print sank deep into the mud, but there was nothing beyond it. We searched until sunrise. The forest stayed unnaturally quiet. No birds, no movement. The air felt heavy, like breathing through wool. At dawn, Rachel found something caught on a branch, strip of fabric from Eric's jacket, frozen stiff. No blood, no sign of struggle, just absence. We argued about heading back, but Nolan insisted on pressing forward. "If he's lost, we'll find him faster by moving uphill," he said. "It's what the trail's designed for." Except there was no trail anymore. When we turned to retrace our steps, the path behind us had changed. Trees we'd passed an hour earlier were gone, replaced by boulders and snowdrifts. The GPS showed us walking in circles, though we'd gone straight uphill. By mid-morning, the ridge fog rolled in, thick and yellow-gray. Nolan set up his camera to capture it, saying it looked cinematic. The lens fogged immediately. He wiped it clean, cursed, and froze. Through the viewfinder, he said he could see Eric walking along the ridge, about 200 feet away. Rachel and I couldn't see anything but mist. When we ran toward the spot, the fog swallowed everything. I called Eric's name, heard it echo back from too close behind me. The sound came again, this time lower, distorted. Rachel grabbed my arm. "We need to go back," she said, trembling. "This isn't fog, it's wrong." We turned around to head downhill, but the camp was gone. The tree line had shifted. The slope beneath our boots was bare rock now, slick with melting ice. No sign of tents or fire. The GPS recalculated by itself, flashing a message I'd never seen before. "Trail updated." And then it showed a new line, a perfect loop connecting to itself. When we followed that loop downhill, the fog opened for just a second, and I swear I saw 4 sets of footprints in the snow, including Eric's leading back toward camp. By the second day, I knew something had gone wrong. The compass spun constantly. The GPS kept flashing signal, recalibrating, and every direction looked the same: gray rock, dead brush, and low fog that clung to the skin like oil. The map app said we were circling the same coordinates, but the terrain beneath our boots kept changing. Rachel grew quiet. Nolan still insisted we were fine, brushing it off as atmospheric distortion. I filmed him for the vlog, trying to sound professional, but my voice on playback sounded slow, like the audio was dragging half a second behind. We kept moving uphill. The fog thinned briefly near noon, revealing a steep slope dotted with old mining debris, splintered timber, a half-collapsed shack, and a rusted cable line that ran into the clouds. Rachel said softly, "He might have gone this way." That word he hung between us. None of us had spoken Eric's name since sunrise. We reached the shack and stepped inside. The roof was gone, but a stove and 2 bunks still sat in the corner. Something scratched faintly beneath the floorboards, rhythmic, like a slow tapping. Nolan knelt down, brushed away dirt, and uncovered a square of wood cut in the shape of a hatch. It was bolted shut from above. He laughed nervously. Probably a mine shaft. Perfect clickbait title. We found what they were digging for. Rachel looked pale. "Don't." He grinned, grabbed a crowbar from his pack, and pried the hatch open. The smell hit us instantly. Wet, rust and rot, like something that had been sealed too long. A black void yawned beneath, the air so cold it smoked. I aimed my flashlight down. The beam didn't hit bottom. Just thick mist, swirling like smoke. And then movement. Not big, but real. Something shifting below, catching the light before sliding out of sight. Nolan swore, shut the hatch, and backed away. "Okay?" he said, forcing a laugh. "That's enough exploration." We left the shack fast, but the forest outside wasn't the same one we'd entered. The slope had flipped direction. The trail now slanted downhill the opposite way. The fog had thickened again, and I could see outlines of trees where open rock had been minutes before. Rachel whispered, "We're not moving. It's moving around us." I told her she was just tired, but I didn't believe myself. Every landmark, every boulder, every stump looked familiar and wrong at the same time. I filmed to compare footage later, but when I replayed it, the timestamps were off. The video started before I hit record. We stopped to rest. Nolan unpacked his camera to check his footage. "Weird," he muttered. "Look." On his screen, the shot from earlier, the ridge, the fog, the shape he thought was Eric was still there. But when he zoomed in, it wasn't one figure. It was 3, standing in a line, facing us. Could be reflection artifacts, I said automatically, but I'd seen enough light distortion to know this wasn't that. The figures were solid. One of them was wearing a bright orange jacket, Eric's. That's when we heard it again, the tapping. Faint, distant, like something metallic striking rock. We turned, scanning the fog. The sound grew clearer, moving in a slow circle around us. Not footsteps, measured, deliberate taps, like a pick hitting stone in rhythm. Rachel covered her ears, whispering, "It's the miners. It's still working." The noise stopped. Then, just once, a voice called through the mistlow, far, but unmistakably human. "Down here." Nolan swung the camera toward the sound. His lens focused on the edge of the fog, where a narrow path had opened between trees. At the end of it stood a figure. Same build as Eric, same orange jacket. He was waving for us to follow. Rachel screamed, "Don't!" But Nolan was already moving, running down the new path. I ran after him, shouting, the fog swallowing every word. The path narrowed, twisted, then opened into a clearing I didn't recognize. Nolan was gone. The footprints stopped mid-stride, in hard-packed snow. Rachel stumbled out behind me, sobbing. The GPS beeped again. Trail updated. Now, there were 3 names listed under active waypoints: mine, Rachel's, and Eric's. When I looked up from the screen, I saw a 4th set of prints forming ahead of us, pressing into the snow one step at a time, though no one was there to make them. We didn't talk for hours after Nolan vanished. The fog had thickened to a wall of colorless haze. No wind, no echo. Even our breathing sounded muted, as if the air refused to carry sound anymore. Rachel walked ahead, mumbling to herself, one hand gripping the GPS. I filmed out of habit, mechanical, useless instinct. Every few seconds, the screen would freeze on a single frame, empty snow, or blurred faces that weren't ours. By late afternoon, we found what looked like a valley cut between two cliffs. It felt like a way out. The air there was warmer, faintly metallic. We followed the pass until the slope dipped and leveled into a clearing dotted with old mining timbers. At the far end stood a single wooden archway, the remains of a trail marker. Faded paint on the board read, "Hatcher Loop." Rachel stopped dead. We already passed this. She was right. I checked my footage, same broken arch, same beam pattern, same tree, with the lightning scar behind it. The trail hadn't led us anywhere. It had folded. The GPS chimed again, the screen flickering. "You have returned to start." Rachel dropped it and bolted. I chased after her, shouting, "Stop. You'll get lost." But the fog parted just long enough for me to see her running toward the woods. Then she was gone. Her tracks disappeared mid-sprint, like they'd been erased. I stood alone in that clearing for a long time. The air was thick with the faint metallic hum of something moving underground, same rhythm as the tapping we'd heard before. I started walking without direction, just to keep moving. But every step brought me past the same fallen log, the same shattered crate. The world had turned circular. Then came the whisper. Not through the air, through the ground. Low vibrations that carried words I couldn't fully hear. Something about "finish the path." I turned my camera back on, pointing it toward the archway. The lens auto-focused on something standing beneath it. For a second I thought it was Rachel, but the proportions were wrong. Too long in the arms, too still in the spine. The face was shadowed beneath a hood, but I could see a pale jaw and dark sockets where eyes should have been. It raised one hand and beckoned me forward, the same gesture Eric had made. The camera battery died right then, but the LED light stayed on, glowing faintly. I should have run. Instead, I followed. The fog thickened, closing behind me. Under the arch, the snow was blackened, slick with frost that didn't melt. My boots made no sound as I stepped through. On the other side, the landscape was wrong. No trees, no sky, just gray mist, stretching infinitely. Shapes moved faintly at the edge of vision. People-shaped, distorted by distance or something else. The ground crunched beneath me, though I couldn't see what I was walking on. Then I saw the others. They stood in a wide circle, motionless. Eric, Rachel, Nolan, all facing outward, each holding something in their hands. Cameras, GPS units, a crowbar. Their faces were pale and calm, eyes unfocused like mannequins. I called out, but none turned. I stepped closer and realized the sound underfoot wasn't snow, it was glass. The surface was covered in frozen reflections or faces, captured mid-expression, looking up from below. Rachel blinked. Not her reflection, the real one. Slowly, her head turned toward me, her neck cracking audibly. She spoke in a voice that didn't sound like hers at all. The trail's mapped now. Behind her, the fog pulsed, once light spreading like breath through it. The hum deepened until it was all I could hear. Eric turned next, his mouth opening wide, impossibly wide, the sound of rushing wind pouring out. My knees buckled. The arch behind me was gone. I ran blind, following my own echo, until I tripped and crashed to the ground. The GPS slid from my pocket, screen shattered. It flickered once before dying completely. In the reflection of its cracked glass, I saw figures closing in, each step slow, synchronized, deliberate. They stopped around me. For a second, everything went silent. Then the fog parted enough for me to see what stood in the middle of the circle. It wasn't a person. It was a shape cut from air itself, shifting and pulsing like heat on asphalt. Inside it, faint outlines of countless trails spiraled inward forever. I understood then why the pass was called Hatcher. It wasn't a name, it was a process. Something opening, something releasing what had been buried. The shape leaned closer, whispering with 1,000 overlapping voices. Finish the loop. The last thing I remember is cold. They found my camera weeks later near the main road, frozen solid, the memory card intact. The final video runs for 6 hours of static. In the last frame, a trail marker stands clear, in the fog-fresh paint. Perfect lettering. Hatcher Pass Trail open year-round. And if you visit now, the GPS still updates at midnight, adding one new waypoint every time someone vanishes. When you've spent enough winters in northern Alaska doing seismic work, you start to believe the earth can whisper. Sometimes it hums under your boots, sometimes it sighs through frozen ground. But in Kotzebue, last February, the ground didn't whisper, it rang. We were there mapping a permafrost melt corridor for a petroleum survey. My team was small, me, 2 grad interns, and a logistics guy named Henry. We had a temporary field base a few miles from the coast, a prefab trailer, a half-buried generator, and a dozen vibration sensors planted in a neat grid across the tundra. For the first few days, everything was routine. Wind readings steady, frost lines clean, no anomalies in the seismic charts. Then, on the 4th night, one of the sensors started pinging rhythmically. Not random interference. Every few minutes, it recorded a tone around 38 Hz, the same pitch, the same spacing. At first I thought it was equipment error, or maybe the generator harmonics leaking into the data. But when I turned the generator off, the signal kept coming, a pure, low vibration, almost musical. Henry called it the bells. He said the sound carried faintly through the ice if you pressed your ear to the ground. I laughed at that, till I tried it myself. The air that night was so cold it froze the inside of your nostrils. I lay flat on the tundra, cheek pressed to the crusted surface. At first, all I heard was the blood in my ears. Then, faintly, like it was echoing from somewhere deep below, came the sound, ding, ding ding. Perfect intervals. Perfect tone. I sat up fast. The others stared at me. Henry grinned like he'd proven something. Told you, he said. Over the next few hours, the pattern grew stronger. The frequency drifted upward slightly, like whatever caused it was moving closer. We logged the coordinates and cross-checked for subsurface caverns. Nothing. Solid ice. Hundreds of feet thick. The next morning, a small patch of ground near Sensor 12 had sunk several inches overnight. Meltwater pooled on top, refrozen by dawn. A perfect circular depression. Henry swore he saw steam rising from it just before sunrise. I told him he probably saw heat shimmer from the generator exhaust. But when I went to inspect the site, I found the edges lined with what looked like crystallized salt. Not frost crystalline deposits, layered like mineral growth. And from the center, faint vibration pulsed upward, regular as a heartbeat. That night, the bells started again louder. This time, the tone shifted every hour, forming a sequence, almost a scale. It was mesmerizing, even comforting, until around 2 a.m., when the generator lights flickered and every sensor spiked at once. The vibration stopped. Then, one by one, the sensors rebooted each, playing back the same recorded pulse. When aligned, the tones formed a simple melody. 4 notes repeated. I checked the logs. The pattern wasn't random, it matched an old Soviet seismic calibration signal used in the 1960s for deep earth mapping, Henry said quietly. They're answering back. I told him to shut up. But part of me wondered. The next day, we drilled a shallow core sample near Sensor 12. At around 30 feet, the drill hit something hard metallic, but not rock. The vibration came through the bit so strongly that it rattled the rig. We pulled the core barrel up. It was empty. Henry leaned over the hole, listening. "It's louder," he said. I crouched beside him and heard it too. The sound was no longer distant. It was resonant, almost pressure you could feel in your teeth. Then, faintly beneath it, something new joined the tone a second frequency. Lower, discordant, pulsing slower. I shut off the recorder. The others looked uneasy. That night, I woke to find Henry gone. His bunk was empty, jacket missing. Out the window, I saw a single flashlight beam moving across the snow toward sensor 12. I shouted after him, but my voice was swallowed by the wind. The bells rang again faster now, overlapping each other like they were calling to him. When I reached the drill site, the hole was wider, the flashlight lay buried in the snow, and the bells had changed pitch like they were laughing by dawn. Henry still hadn't come back. His footprints led straight to the drill site and ended at the hole's edge. The snow pressed smooth as if melted from underneath. The cold that morning felt different, thick, like breathing through metal. The sound of the bells was gone, but the silence they left behind felt heavier than noise. We radioed the nearest operations base in Fairbanks, but the transmission wouldn't hold. Every time we spoke, our voices came back half a second later, lower, distorted, overlapping themselves. After the third failed attempt, I shut the unit off. Around noon, I decided to widen the drill hole to check for a collapse. The ice around it was glass clear, layers visible like growth rings. At about 15 feet, something glinted inside. I lowered a flashlight down. The beam vanished into black water-moving water. There shouldn't have been liquid this deep in February. I dropped a small sensor mic into the borehole. The sound came immediately through the receiver metal scraping against metal, faint but rhythmic. Then, under it, something else, murmuring. Dozens of low voices blending into a kind of tone. The interns wanted to leave. I told them we'd document the anomaly, pack up, and go. It was half a lie. The scientist in me couldn't walk away. The pattern wasn't random. Each bell tone was an exact harmonic division of the Earth's natural seismic frequency, like the planet itself was being played as an instrument. By evening, the vibrations returned. The ice near the hole shimmered like something alive beneath it, ripples spreading in slow concentric rings. My teeth ached with every pulse. I pressed my palm against the surface and felt faint warmth radiating through my glove. Then the bells changed. The tones climbed rapidly, each sharper than the last, until they merged into a single piercing hum. The generator died. The lights snapped off. We scrambled for flashlights. The air inside the trailer felt charged, thin. From outside came a single clang, deep and hollow, like a struck bell the size of a mountain. Then again, and again, each one closer. I shouted Henry's name into the dark, but the wind carried something back that wasn't my voice. It sounded like someone trying to repeat the word, getting closer to the rhythm but not the meaning. I stepped outside. The sky glowed faint green from the aurora, curling like smoke. The hole at sensor 12 pulsed faintly, the snow around it liquefying in a perfect circle. The two interns stood near the doorway, too afraid to move. The bells kept tolling, slower now, as though waiting for an answer. One of the interns whispered, "It's counting." He was right. Each ring came at decreasing intervals, 3 minutes, then 2, then 1. The pattern reminded me of a countdown. I set up a ground sensor directly over the hole, trying to triangulate depth. The reading spiked past measurable range, the graph flattening out. Beneath the static hum, a voice came through the feed. 39 at 28. I ripped the cable out, but the voice continued, faint and echoing from underground. It didn't sound like Henry. It didn't sound human. I ran back toward the trailer to grab my emergency locator. The door was wide open. Inside, frost had climbed the walls like veins. and my laptop screen displayed live seismic data scrolling endlessly, no inputs connected. The waveforms formed repeating letters across the graph, jagged but deliberate, HENRY. I froze. The interns bolted into the snow, one of them screaming that he could see something under the ice. I followed their gaze and saw a faint silhouette moving slowly beneath the surface, arms outstretched, face turned upward, mouth open as if singing. The bells stopped. The world went completely still. Then, just once, a single deep tone erupted from the ground beneath our feet, throwing me to my knees. The vibration rattled through my spine, echoing in my skull. The interns collapsed, hands clamped over their ears. When the tone faded, the hole had closed smooth ice, no seam, no trace of melting. I called out until my throat tore, but there was nothing. That night, the sky burned green and white. The aurora moved in perfect circles above our camp, spiraling inward like something being pulled through. The sensors all turned on by themselves and began recording again, logging one single data string over and over, open. When I played the audio back, the bells were gone, but underneath the static, I heard Henry's voice whisper, almost through. I didn't sleep. None of us did not, after hearing that voice. The interns sat silent in their bunks, eyes fixed on the floor. Every few minutes, the trailer trembled like something enormous was shifting miles below us. The air pressure kept rising, popping in our ears. The hum had changed. It wasn't a tone anymore, but a rhythm, deliberate and complex, almost like speech. By morning, one intern, Derek, he said we needed to destroy the equipment. It's calling, he whispered. We're microphones, not listeners. The other Mara just stared through the window toward the buried hole. He's still down there, she murmured. He's asking us to help. The sky that day was gray-white, sun diffused into a colorless haze. I stepped outside and felt the ground vibrating under my boots, steady as a pulse. Every few seconds, the ice cracked faintly, lines spidering outward from where sensor 12 used to be. I crouched, placed my gloved hand against the surface, and felt faint warmth again, warmer than the air, warmer than the earth should be. I should have left. I should have evacuated and filed my report from Fairbanks. But something about that vibration pulled at me. Every instinct I had screamed that we were standing over a cavity that wasn't natural, not geological, something deeper, older. I dragged the portable sonar unit over and calibrated it for a wide area scan. The image that came up froze me. Under the ice lay a hollow structure, massive, circular, maybe half a mile across. The edges were jagged, uneven, as if carved rather than eroded. From its center, tunnels branched outward like veins. The pattern matched no cave system I'd ever studied, but I recognized the symmetry, organic symmetry, like bone. Before I could save the data, the sonar screen filled with interference. The static lines coalesced into a single, flickering symbol, a ring intersected by vertical lines like a tuning fork inside a circle. Then, faint through the speaker, came Henry's voice again. It's open. The ground shook hard enough to knock the unit over. Derek shouted from the trailer. I turned and froze. Steam was rising from the snow in long, thin plumes. Beneath it, the ice turned translucent, glowing from below. The bells began again. Not faint, not distant here. Every sensor in the area pinged simultaneously. The tones formed a perfect chord, deep and resonant, shaking the air. I fell to my knees, covering my ears. But it wasn't sound anymore, it was vibration through my bones. A pressure behind the eyes. The ice cracked open. The hole didn't explode outward. It peeled apart, like fabric torn slowly. Heat blasted through, bringing the stench of brine and something metallic. I stumbled backward, barely keeping my footing. From the widening gap rose light, not fire, not glow, but something refracted. Like sunlight bent through deep water, through it, shapes moved. Not forms, not bodies, patterns of motion that felt wrong to perceive. They pulsed in rhythm with the bells. Mara walked toward the hole before I could stop her. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Derek grabbed her arm. "No, listen. It's copying us." He was right. The tones had changed, matching our speech cadences, imitating syllables through sound. The vibrations formed broken words, one of them clear enough to understand. Below, the ground buckled. Derek screamed as the ice split beneath his feet, swallowing him whole. His flashlight spun across the snow, beaming into the opening until it disappeared. I dragged Mara back to the trailer, slammed the door, and hit the distress beacon. Nothing. The power flickered, every light pulsing to the rhythm of the tones. Through the window, the hole widened, the steam pouring upward like breath. The bells rose to a deafening peak, then stopped. Silence. Outside, the ice began to freeze shut again. The glow faded. The hole sealed completely, leaving smooth, untouched snow. For a moment, everything looked as it had before. Then my laptop, long dead, powered on by itself. The seismic logs reopened and started writing new data lines and lines of live frequency input. At the bottom of the page appeared a single message in all caps: "Communication established." Mara was trembling. "What does that mean?" she whispered. Before I could answer, the ground gave one final, deep rumble, like an exhale. The vibrations ceased completely. No signal, no movement, no sound. The silence was total. We were flown out 3 days later by a recovery team. They said they found no sign of the hole, just scorched ice and fused metal where our sensors had been. The data drive I saved showed nothing but blank noise, but when I play it back through headphones every time, faintly beneath the static I still hear Henry's voice, calm, triumphant, they answered. And sometimes, when I'm alone in my office, the vibration starts, again barely audible, deep enough to rattle glass, and a new line of text appears on my computer screen, unprompted, perfectly timed with the hum, "Your turn." I thought we'd discovered what was beneath the ice, but the truth is, it discovered us first. If you've ever lived near the Yentna River, you know it's got moods. In spring, it's all ice melt and fury. In midsummer, it's calm enough to reflect the clouds perfectly right before it starts eating things it shouldn't. My father used to say the river was alive, but back then, I thought he meant it like a joke. After what I've seen, I know he wasn't joking. My family's fished these waters for 3 generations. We run drift nets along the bends, haul salmon, whitefish, sometimes trout, if the run's good. The locals joke that we know the Yentna's heartbeat better than our own. Maybe that's why it noticed us first. The first sign was the smell. Usually, this time of year, the water carries the temps of silt and algae. But one July morning, when I went out to set the nets, the air smelled like iron, sharp and clean, almost surgical. The current ran slower than usual, the surface strangely smooth. I was halfway across the main channel when my engine sputtered. The boat just died. I grabbed the oars and drifted, letting the current carry me toward the net line. It was quiet to quiet. No birds, no mosquitoes, no wind. Even the usual chatter from the other boats on the radio had gone dead. When I reached the nets, they were heavy, so heavy the line bowed. I thought it was a good haul until I started pulling. The first few feet came up tangled in kelp that shouldn't have been there. Then something pale surfaced. At first glance, I thought it was a fish belly, bloated and slick. But then I saw hair. A human face broke the surface, gray, bloated, eyes open and staring up at me. It wasn't floating free. It was entangled in the net like any catch. I screamed, almost fell backward into the water. My hands shook so bad I dropped the gaff. When I looked again, the face had sunk. I hauled the rest of the net fast, half expecting to see a body attached. Nothing, just torn mesh and a handful of scales that weren't from any fish I'd seen before. When I got back to shore, my father was waiting by the dock. He looked at the net, then at me. His face went pale. "Where?" he asked. I pointed upriver. He didn't say another word. Just started cutting the damaged section out of the line. "Don't fish that bend again," he said finally. "Not this season." I pressed him, but he just kept working the knife through the rope. Every 10 years or so, it changes. The current, the water, the sound it makes. When it does, you pull your nets somewhere else. Always. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind was calm, but I kept hearing something soft tapping, like someone knocking under the dock. I went outside with a flashlight. The tide was low, mudflats glistening silver under the moon. Something moved in the shallows. I caught a glimpse of pale shapes shifting just under the surface, long, thin, human-like fingers pushing against the water. Then, a single voice whispered, almost too low to hear, "Help me." I ran back inside, slammed the door, and didn't move until sunrise. The next morning, the smell was worse, metallic, heavy, clinging to everything. When I checked the river, dozens of fish floated bellied up downstream. Some were missing their faces, like the skin had sloughed off cleanly. I took my father's skiff out again, despite his warnings. The air above the water shimmered like heat, though the temperature barely reached 40. I dropped a sonar line. The display showed something massive moving beneath the surface, something that didn't fit any depth contour. When I reached to reel the line back, the wire snapped, tight pulled from below with sudden force. The reel spun so fast it burned my palm. I grabbed the handle, but whatever was down there yanked once more, hard enough to drag the boat half a meter sideways. Then it stopped. The current went completely still. The sonar blinked twice, then displayed one word on the depth line, where numbers should have been: return. That night, the river changed its course by 10 feet. The next morning, someone else's boat was found drifting with nobody inside. By the next morning, word had spread about the empty boat. Belonged to a man named Carl Denoltimer, lived 3 miles up. His skiff was found drifting near the same bend where I'd hauled up that face. No damage, no fuel leak, nothing missing, just a single wet boot in the hull. The sheriff's office sent a deputy to ask some questions. But out here, questions don't go far. The Yentna doesn't give bodies back fast enough for paperwork. They told us to keep fishing downstream until the thaw. Said it was just shifting ice. But the smell was getting worse. Not rot, something cleaner, sharper, metallica like blood diluted with river silt. My father stopped eating fish altogether. He sat out by the dock each night, just listening to the current. 3 nights after Carl disappeared, I heard him talking to someone. I stepped outside quietly and saw him kneeling by the riverbank, whispering to the dark water. When I called his name, he turned sharply. His face looked hollowed, eyes rimmed in gray. "They're restless again," he said. Should have known when the sound came back. I asked what sound. He didn't answer. Later, after he went inside, I walked down to the edge with my flashlight. The water was low, current slow enough to show reflections. I leaned down, trying to hear what he meant, and then I caught it. A faint hum beneath the surface. Not mechanical, not like the sonar rigs we used. It was deeper, almost like a voice too low to make words. Every few seconds, a soft metallic ring carried through the mud. Ding ding. Ding. The same pitch as the bells under the ice from an old story he used to tell. I never believed him until that moment. The next day, I found my nets shredded again. The floats had been pulled under, ropes twisted around each other as if knotted by hands. The tiers in the mesh were clean, almost surgical. I brought one section home to patch, but when I laid it out, I noticed something embedded in the fibers, a clump of hair. Human, black and coarse, tangled with algae. My stomach turned. I went to show my father, but he was gone. His jacket still hung by the door. I followed his trail upriver until I reached the bend. The same cursed stretch. Fog hung low over the water, heavy and yellow-white. His boat drifted near the shore, tied off but empty. When I climbed aboard, I saw footprints on the deck, wet and small barefoot, not his size. I knelt to check the floorboards. The sound came again beneath me. Ding ding. Louder now, closer. I leaned over the gunwale and shone my flashlight straight down. The beam cut through silted water to reveal movement, hundreds of pale shapes undulating below, long strands rising like weeds. Then, for half a second, a face surfaced just beneath the ripples, white as ice, eyes open, mouth moving like it was speaking. I jerked back so fast I fell onto the dock, dropping the light. When I scrambled up, the fog had thickened. I couldn't see the boat anymore, only ripples, spreading outward, slow and deliberate, as if something large had surfaced beneath it. By the time I ran home, my father's boots were gone from the porch. That night, the sound returned again, louder than ever. It didn't echo this time. It vibrated through the ground, through the walls, into my teeth. I looked out the window and saw the water line creeping higher, swelling against the pilings like the tide was reversing. The radio crackled once, even though I hadn't turned it on. Static. Then, a voice ragged, distant, but unmistakable. My father's. Pull the nets, now. The window glass flexed from the pressure, and through it I saw movement beneath the dock shapes, shifting like a net full of bodies, rising through black water. When I opened the door, the river was already spilling over the edge of the bank, moving against gravity, curling upward in slow waves. The hum became a tone, a single, steady pitch that rattled my bones. I staggered backward and fell into the mud. The water stilled. Then the sound stopped. Everything went silent, again except for the wind carrying my father's voice one last time, soft and close, right by my ear. Don't fish it tomorrow, at dawn. The river was calm again, but every boat left tied overnight had drifted loose, each net hanging below, perfectly filled to bursting with fish that all had the same gray human eyes. I didn't go out the next day. I couldn't. The sight of those nets, every one of them straining, with catch that shouldn't exist, burned itself into my mind. The fish had human eyes, dull gray, staring up from beneath the surface. Some of them blinked. I swear they did. By noon, the town was buzzing. No one admitted to seeing what I saw, but everyone knew. The radio chatter was thin, broken, and nobody used names anymore, just numbers for coordinates. Downriver crews said the current had split in two directions, running both upstream and down, dragging boats in circles. That night, I heard the bells again, not from the water this time, but from under the ground. The floorboards trembled with each low toll. I stood by the window, watching the river glow faintly in the dark. The surface shimmered like glass, smooth and still. Then I saw movement at the edge of the dock, someone standing ankle-deep in the water. It looked like my father. Same jacket, same stooped posture. I opened the door and stepped outside. Calling his name, he didn't answer. I waded forward, boots sinking into the soft mud. Dad. The figure turned its head. The light hit his face, and my breath caught. It was him, sort of. The skin was pale and stretched, hair slicked flat, like he'd just come out of the water. His eyes were cloudy, pupils faint gray discs. But when he spoke, the voice was his. You shouldn't have stayed. I stumbled backward, slipping into the water. Cold hit me like a shock. I scrambled for the dock ladder, but he stepped closer, moving too smoothly, like the current carried him instead of his legs. It's hungry again, he said. It needs the ones who know how to feed it. Something brushed my ankle underwater, something soft that wrapped around me and let go. I hauled myself onto the dock, gasping. When I looked back, he was gone, only ripples spreading outward, slow and rhythmic, like breathing. I spent the rest of the night sitting by the window with a rifle across my knees, though I don't know what I thought it would stop. The sound never fully went away. Beneath the wind, the bells kept tolling faintly, matching my heartbeat. By morning, the river had changed again. The main channel had shifted east, cutting straight through a grove of spruce. The banks were littered with dead fish, pale and swollen. Every single one faced upstream. When I went to the dock, my nets were gone. The ropes had been sliced clean through, no fray, no tear, just severed. I decided to leave, packed my truck with fuel cans and gear, planning to drive to Anchorage and never look back. But when I reached the road out of town, it was flooded black water, lapping over the asphalt. The current ran in both directions again. The hum came through the steering wheel, vibrating into my bones. I turned off the ignition, and it kept going. Louder. It wasn't the river anymore, it was coming from beneath the truck. The water began to bubble. Something pressed upward against the surface, from below several somethings. Hands, pale and slick, stretching out of the current, pressing against the underside of the vehicle like they were feeling for a way in. I slammed the accelerator, tires spinning in water until they caught the road. The hands slid away, but not before one brushed the side window, leaving a streak like an oil smear that shimmered faintly. I didn't stop until I reached the bluff overlooking the Yentna's mouth. From up there, the river looked like it was breathing, expanding and contracting in long, slow motions, and just as the sun hit the horizon, I saw them dot figures standing along both banks. Dozens of them, motionless, half submerged. Their clothes were soaked and colorless. Some still held nets, lines drifting lazily downstream. Their faces were featureless until the light caught them. Then I saw my father among them, and Carl, and others I knew, had gone missing years ago. They turned their heads together, looking upriver, not at me. The water around them rippled outward, as if something massive was moving beneath them, something with rhythm, something with a pattern. The bells tolled once more. I realized then what my father had meant by it needs, the ones who know how to feed it. The Yentna doesn't take strangers, it takes its own fishermen, families who've always belonged here. I left that night, but I don't think leaving mattered. The sound followed me inland, faint through the walls of the motel, vibrating in the plumbing, humming in the radiator. Every 10 beats, a soft metallic ding-dot. They say the river changes its catch every decade. I used to think that was superstition, but last week I saw something on the news, a photo of new flooding up north. The reporter stood by the bank, water lapping behind him. Just for a moment, before the feed cut, I saw faces moving under the surface, and in the background, through the static of the broadcast, I heard it again, soft and distant ding, ding ding. I took the northern route for the first time last winter, covering emergency calls between scattered villages outside Kotlik and Unaloklit. It's a lonely circuit, frozen airstrips, snowmobile trails, and radio check-ins every few hours, just to let dispatch know you're still breathing. Most calls are frostbite, flu, or the occasional hunting accident, but every so often, you get something else, something that doesn't make sense in the report. This one came through on January 18th, a request for wellness check, single occupant, elderly male Meister, Peter Kalvak. The dispatcher hesitated before reading the address. That's the same place we logged last month, she said. Didn't that one close? Apparently not. The coordinates took me 3 hours by snowmobile, following a trail that barely existed under the drifts. The sky was bruised purple, horizon lost in blowing snow. By the time I saw the cabin, I was half frozen and out of daylight. The windows were blacked out with plastic. Smoke rose faintly from the chimney. Someone was alive in there. I parked the sled and knocked. No answer. I called through the door. Mr. Kalvak. It's Nurse Hall from the circuit clinic. Still nothing. I tried the handle. It turned. Inside smelled of antiseptic and rot. The air was humid from a kettle boiling on the stove. The heat hit me like a wall. In the corner stood an old man in a parka, back turned, muttering softly in Yupik. I relaxed a little, stepped closer. "Sir, we got a call to check on you. Are you all right?" He didn't move. His breathing was shallow, wet. I circled to face him and froze. His eyes were open but unfocused, his face slack and gray. He wasn't speaking, his lips moved, but no sound came out. What I'd heard wasn't him. It came from behind me, a low whisper. He called again. I spun around. The room was empty, except for the stove, the kettle hissing. Then the old man's head twitched violently to the side, like someone had grabbed his chin. His chest heaved once, and his hand shot up, gripping my arm with inhuman strength. His skin was cold, ice cold. I shouted, pulling free. He staggered forward, mouth working like he was trying to breathe words. The whisper came again, louder this time. "You shouldn't have come back." Every instinct told me to run, but I forced myself to reach for my stethoscope. Reflex, I guess. That's what we do, we check vitals. But when I pressed the diaphragm to his chest, I heard nothing. Not silence, nothing. No echo, no resonance. Like pressing it to an empty shell. His eyes rolled back white. Then he exhaled, a long, dry hiss, and collapsed. I checked for a pulse weak, erratic, then gone. I radioed dispatch, hands shaking. Static answered, then a single burst of feedback, sharp enough to hurt. I tried again. Patient deceased. I'm returning to base. Before I left, I checked the ID on the table. It was too clean, laminated recently. Peter Kalvak, deceased 2009. That couldn't be right. Outside, the wind had died. The air felt thick, muffled. I strapped my gear to the sled and turned back once. The cabin's window was fogged from inside, a handprint pressed against it. For a second, I thought I saw his silhouette standing again behind the plastic face turned toward me. The engine struggled to start, coughing through the cold. I looked up one last time. The light in the cabin flickered off. I didn't realize until halfway back that I could still hear the kettle whistling faintly, even though I was miles away. That night, dispatch called me. The operator sounded confused. "Hey, Hall, we got a call logged from your number. Said you were headed back to check on a patient." "I didn't call," I said. "You sure?" Came through at 2214, male voice. Said he needed to be seen again. Said he'd died, but you'd come anyway. When I checked the call log on my radio, the outgoing number was mine, but the timestamp was from 10 minutes in the future. I barely slept that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I heard that kettle steady, whistling through miles of snow. When I finally drifted off, my radio crackled to life around 3 a.m. The voice was faint, almost whispering through static. "You forgot his second dose?" I sat bolt upright, grabbed the handset. "Dispatch, this is Nurse Hall. Who is this?" No response. Only that low hiss, that sounds less like interference and more like breath. I cut power to the unit. But even with it off, the speaker clicked once like someone tapping the line from the other end. By morning, the storm had cleared. I convinced myself it had to be feedback or crossed frequencies from the Coast Guard channel. Anything else meant thinking about what I saw in that cabin. I reported in at base camp by noon. My supervisor, Tom, was logging vitals from another route when I told him about the call. He frowned, scratching his beard. "Kalvak, you sure on that name?" "Yeah." "Why?" He pulled up the old death certificate on his tablet. "We did a retrieval there back in '09. Guy froze solid, mid-sentence they said. Neighbor found him sitting at his table like he'd just stopped breathing. He looked at me for a long time. No one's lived out there since." I didn't argue, but I knew what I saw: the heat, the kettle, the handprint on the glass. I was ready to drop it until dispatch buzzed me again. Around 5 p.m., "We got another ping from your coordinates last night," they said. "Same ID signature." "You sure you didn't head back?" The words made my stomach twist. I checked my GPS log. There was a second route marked, branching from my return path, and looping back toward Kalvak's cabin, but I never turned around. I decided to ride out there once more, if only to prove to myself I hadn't lost it. Tom tried to stop me. "If you're hearing echoes, you don't chase them," he said. "That's how people freeze out here." I went anyway. The trail looked different, like something had smoothed it overnight. No snowmobile tracks. The sky had that whiteout brightness that erases distance. You can't tell if you're looking at 10 feet or a mile. When I reached the coordinates, the cabin wasn't there. The trees looked the same, the slope, the frozen stream, but the cabin itself was gone. Only a black rectangle of sunken snow, where the foundation should have been. In the center sat a single metal kettle, half buried, still warm to the touch. The air went quiet, thick as wool. I felt pressure in my ears, like the world was holding its breath. Then the snow under my boots shifted. I stepped back. A faint outline appeared beneath the surface hands, pushing upward from underneath the ice. I stumbled backward and fell. The ice cracked faintly, but didn't break. The hands pressed once. More. Slower this time, like something was feeling for me through the frost. Then a voice, muffled but distinct. "Don't leave me alone again." I ran. The wind picked up behind me, rising into a low wail that sounded too much like words. My sled wouldn't start at first, engine choked, fuel line frozen, but I kept pulling the cord until it screamed to life. I didn't look back until I was halfway down the trail. The trees had bent inward over the clearing, forming a canopy of ice. And just as I cleared the ridge, I saw a glow flicker to life beneath the snow where the cabin had been orange, warm, like firelight, seen through glass. Back at camp, my clothes steamed from sweat. Tom was waiting by the radio, pale. "We got another call from your line," he said quietly. Male voice this time. "Said he was at the clinic waiting for you. Said the appointment was for 6:30. I looked at the clock. It was 6:29. The radio came alive again, no one touching it. The same voice spoke calm, rasping. "You can't leave a patient half-treated." Then silence. I checked the radio's call log again. It showed 2 active transmissions, one outgoing, one incoming, both listed under my name. When I checked the signal trace, it showed the origin point wasn't the clinic or my sledette was coming from under the ice. I should have left after that second call. Every part of me knew it. But I couldn't stop thinking about that voice. The phrasing, the breath between words, it wasn't static or feedback. It was human, and it sounded tired, like a man asking for help. That's the trap with this job. You spend years training yourself not to ignore people in pain, even when you know better. 2 nights later, I packed a medkit and went back toward the coordinates. I didn't tell Tom. I left before dawn, riding into a flat, white silence that swallowed everything but the engine's hum. The GPS glitched halfway through, blinking, rerouting to the same location over and over. Kalvak's site, active. By the time I reached the clearing, it was snowing hard. The wind had died, but the air moved in strange rhythms, like breath exhaling through a cracked door. I cut the engine and listened. At first, only the wind. Then, faint beneath it, the sound of boiling water. The kettle again. I followed the sound through the fog, stepping where the cabin should have been. My boots sank deeper than they should have, like the ground had softened under the crust. The snow thinned and then gave way completely to black ice. The kettle sat in the center, steam rising lazily into the gray air. Beneath the ice, something glowed faintly orange, shifting with slow movement. I should have turned back right then, but I knelt and touched the kettle. It was hot, and under my glove, the ice vibrated, humming through the bone. Then, from behind me, "I told you not to leave." I spun around. The old man Kalvak stood just outside the fog. His parka hung open, soaked dark with frost. His mouth moved, but his chest didn't rise. The words came from the air, not his throat. I stumbled backward. "You're dead," I said. He smiled faintly. "That's what I told them." The ground cracked beneath the kettle. Steam poured up, thick and bitter, smelling like antiseptic and something sour underneath. Through it, I could see movement, hands pressed against the ice from below, dozens of them, pale and trembling. They weren't clawing. They were reaching. Kalvak took another step forward. The fog moved with him, drawn in by the heat. It was cold, too long, he said. They needed warmth, they called. The kettle tipped over. The water spilled across the ice, hissing where it met the surface. Everywhere it touched, the frost melted in veins that spread outward like capillaries. The light underneath brightened. I turned and ran for the sled, but the snow was gone. Every direction looked the same flat gray. No horizon, no tracks. My radio hissed in my pocket. When I pulled it out, it was already transmitting. My own voice came through the speaker. Vitals, stable. Temperature normal. Beginning rewarming. The recording was from my first visit the moment before he'd grabbed my arm. Kalvak's voice came next, overlapping mine. Don't stop now. You don't expect much excitement guarding a frozen airstrip north of the Arctic Circle. Coldfoot Station isn't even a real airport, just a refueling point for survey planes and cargo drops. By November, we maybe get one flight a day, and half of those turn back because of weather. I took the night shift because it pays extra and because I don't like people. The hangars creak like old ships, and the floodlights throw long shadows across the ice. I used to think the wind was the only thing that could make a sound out here. That was before the night the wrong plane landed. It was December 4th. Visibility was near zero, snow, thick as static. Around 2:15 a.m., the perimeter alarm tripped. The motion sensor by Hangar B picked up movement. I figured it was a bear, or maybe a fuel tarp blowing loose. But then the runway lights flicked on automatically. That only happens when a transponder signal hits the tower. No one had clearance to land. Through the snow, I saw a shape coming down the glide paths. Mall twin prop. Old model. Like something out of the 1970s. The landing was perfect. Too perfect. I waited for dispatch to confirm. But the radio was silent. The plane rolled to a stop halfway down the strip, engines winding down smooth, as if it had just come off maintenance. I got into the pickup and drove out, floodlight cutting through the snow. The tail number was almost worn off in 731DF, but it looked familiar. When I pulled alongside, the cockpit was dark. No radio chatter, no signal beacon. I climbed out, waved my flashlight. Coldfoot security. Identify yourself. Nothing. I opened the side door. The hinges squealed, metal cold enough to burn through my gloves. Inside, the cabin was spotless, no cargo, no seats. Just a long, empty fuselage, lined with frost. The air smelled faintly of jet fuel and something sweet, almost floral. Then I heard the engine turn over once. I jumped back, thinking I'd hit a switch, but the cockpit was still dark. The propellers twitched and stopped. I climbed up to the flight deck. Both control seats were empty, and the instruments were dead, except for one altimeter needle, slowly ticking up and down. It wasn't mechanical movement. It was like something breathing. The radio crackled. Coldfoot Station. This is Delta Foxtrot. Requesting permission to land. I froze. That tail number DF. I looked at the fuselage again. N731DF. The call was coming from this plane. I grabbed my handheld and answered. You've already landed. Identify yourself. Static. Then the same voice again. Identical tone. Identical pause. Coldfoot Station. This is Delta Foxtrot. Requesting permission to land. I backed out fast, slipping on the ice. The wind picked up again, snow swirling around the hangar. When I looked back, the plane's lights were on cockpit, glowing warm orange. Propellers spinning slowly like they were testing throttle. I ran for the control tower. The tower feed was blank. No radar contact. No recorded landing. I called dispatch. After a few seconds, a half-asleep voice came through. Security, you're dreaming, man. That tail number's been retired since 1987. Lost over the Brooks Range, never found. I stared out the window. The runway was empty. No lights, no plane, just drifting snow. When I went back to Hangar B at sunrise, there were fresh tire tracks frozen into the ice thin. Perfect, like the landing gear had touched down minutes ago. At the end of the tracks, near the hangar door, something small lay half buried in the frost. A pilot's headset. The mic bent inward like it had been crushed in someone's hand. The inside was still warm. I logged the whole thing, but the report got flagged environmental interference. The next shift guard laughed it off. That night, around 2:15 again, the runway lights came on by themselves. When I looked out from the tower, I saw the same plane taxiing toward the hangar, but this time, its lights were off, and something was standing in the cockpit window watching me. The next night, I told myself I wasn't going to check. The plan was simple: stay in the tower, keep the floodlights on, pretend nothing was happening. But around 2:12 a.m., every bulb on the strip flickered, and the generator dropped half its load. 3 minutes later, the runway lights came back on by themselves, one by one, like something invisible was taxiing in. I grabbed my flashlight and binoculars. The snow had stopped, moonlight clear enough to make out the outline of the runway. There it was, again, same twin prop, tail number N731DF, rolling smooth as glass. The propellers barely made a sound. I called dispatch immediately. Coldfoot Station security, 2 base possible unauthorized landing, same craft as last night. Static. Then, faintly, my own voice came back through the line, repeating what I'd just said word for word. That's when I realized the radio wasn't connected. The plane came to a stop by Hangar B again. The hangar door was already open. I never opened it. I told myself I'd just look, just long enough to confirm it was real. The cold hit me like a hammer when I stepped outside. My boots crunched on the snow, and with every step closer, the air got warmer, humid, wrong. The smell was back too, that sweet floral undertone, stronger now, like antifreeze and roses. The plane's door hung open. Inside, light pulsed faintly, almost biological, like the reflection of a heartbeat. I climbed the stairs slowly, every instinct telling me to stop. The cockpit was lit by an orange glow from the instrument panels, though no power ran to the hangar. Both pilot seats were occupied. I almost screamed. The men looked half mummified, skin stretched thin, uniforms from another era, their caps still pinned neatly. Their heads were tilted forward slightly, hands resting on the throttles. I couldn't see their eyes, but their mouths were open just enough to hear it, a faint hiss, like the sound air makes escaping a sealed chamber. Then the intercom speaker above the door crackled. Coldfoot Station. This is Delta Foxtrot, requesting permission to land. I stumbled backward, hit the doorframe, nearly fell down the stairs. When I looked back up, the pilot nearest to me had turned his head slightly, just enough for the light to hit his face. The eyes were open now. They weren't dead. They weren't alive either. I bolted for the control truck and radioed again. This time, dispatch picked up, but it wasn't the same voice as before. Coldfoot Station. A calm, unfamiliar tone said, reading you loud and clear. Please repeat your report. There's an aircraft on site. Repeat, unauthorized aircraft. 2 occupants unresponsive. Copy. The voice interrupted. Stand by. We're showing no contact. Can you confirm your position? I gave my coordinates. Silence. Then, negative. Those coordinates were decommissioned after the crash. The line went dead. I looked up from the handset and saw movement through the hangar window. The plane was turning itself. The landing lights flicked on, illuminating the far wall. My breath fogged as I backed away. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in seconds. The engines started again, slowly at first, then steady. The snow on the ground whipped up into a spiral around the hangar. I heard metal groan as the landing gear retracted, even though the plane hadn't moved. Then the hangar's ceiling lights turned on all at once. The two pilot figures were gone. The cockpit was empty. The sound of the engines continued, but the propellers didn't move. I ran back to the tower and locked the door behind me. From up there, I could see the whole airstrip. The plane's silhouette sat motionless under the lights. Then the runway lamps along the far end began blinking in sequence, the takeoff pattern. I grabbed the binoculars again. The cockpit lights flared. Something was sitting in the right-hand seat now. Not one of the pilots. It was taller, thinner. Its head brushed the canopy glass. The plane started rolling forward, gaining speed without sound. It lifted cleanly off the ground, climbed straight into the dark sky, and vanished into cloud. The lights shut off instantly. The snow settled. When I went down an hour later, the runway was untouched. No tire tracks, no melt pattern, nothing. Only the pilot's headset I'd found the night before, now hanging neatly on the hangar door handle. When I picked it up, a voice whispered through it, low and steady, "Your shift's next." The next night, the tower logs showed 2 entries for 2:15 a.m. One I signed, and one I didn't. Both recorded 30 seconds apart. After the second night, I should have quit. Called it stress, called it altitude sickness, anything but real. But the problem with night work is, when something starts repeating, you get curious. You start timing it, measuring it, trying to understand it until you forget that understanding it might be the worst thing you could do. I reported what I'd seen. They told me to take a rest day. I didn't. I came back to the tower that evening anyway. Around midnight, the air felt wrong, against metallic. The aurora hung low and still, green sheets barely moving, like they were frozen mid. I brewed another pot of coffee, logged the generator cycle, and told myself I'd stay in the tower no matter what happened. At 2:15 sharp, the alarms tripped again. Every camera feed in the system flickered. The runway lights ignited in perfect sequence, sweeping outward like dominoes. I checked the monitors. There it was. The plane N731DF, taxiing down the strip with slow precision. Except this time, it didn't land. It was already there, sitting exactly where it had before, lights glowing faintly through the snow. I switched to infrared. No heat signatures. The hangar doors opened by themselves. The camera static pulsed, bright white for half a second, then cleared. The plane was gone. I stared at the monitor, hands trembling. My headset hissed softly, then clicked. Coldfoot Station. This is Delta Foxtrot. Requesting permission to land. I didn't answer. The voice repeated. Same tone, same pause, identical. It sounded recorded, but every repetition shifted slightly, like whoever was speaking was struggling to remember the words. I muted the line, but I could still hear it through the walls, reverberating like radio waves bouncing off ice. The sound seemed to come from inside the hangar now, though the doors were still closed. I couldn't help it. I had to see. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside. The wind was dead, the cold sharp enough to sting. The snow under my boots was solid, but the air carried that same faint sweetness again, like old flowers. When I reached the hangar, the door creaked open a few inches on its own. Inside, my breath clouded in the beam of the flashlight. The plane was parked perfectly center, engines silent, frost glittering along the fuselage. Then I saw someone moving inside the cockpit. I climbed the stairs slowly, every nerve screaming. The cockpit window reflected my flashlight glare, but when I cupped my hand against the glass, I saw it clearly. Someone sitting in the left seat. They were wearing my uniform. There's a kind of darkness in Alaska that feels heavier than anywhere else. It doesn't fall, it settles, like ash. You learn to live with it when you work maintenance for the state grid. Long roads, dead towns, miles of frozen cables that still hum in the wind. You don't think about how much power runs under all that ice until something starts feeding on it. It started the week before Christmas. Power readings from the Yukon corridor began spiking at night, brief surges that hit the line monitors, then vanished before dispatch could trace them. My supervisor, Charlie, thought it was faulty equipment. I thought maybe frost heave had cracked a cable conduit. So he sent me north to Fort Yukon to check the junction box personally. The town was half deserted, maybe 20 residents still toughing it out through the winter. The sky looked bruised purple, the temperature hovering near 40 below. I parked by the substation, a small metal shack surrounded by snowdrifts, and unlocked the gate. Inside everything looked normal. Voltage stable, ground readings fine, but the air inside the shack felt charged like static building before a storm. Every few seconds, I heard faint pops from the line relays. When I touched the casing, it vibrated gently under my glove. Then, without warning, every light in town came on. I'm not talking about a surge. I mean everything: street lamps, empty houses, even a few porch bulbs in places that hadn't seen tenants in years. All at once, they flared to life, glowing harsh white in the frozen fog. I radioed dispatch. Fort Yukon substation, reading full load, draw confirming false activation. Charlie came through, confused. Full load? That line's been at 30% since fall. You sure? Positive, I said. Something's pulling current across every node. Pull the breaker. I did. Nothing changed. The town stayed lit. For a moment, I thought maybe the relays had fused. I stepped outside to check the feed lines, but what I saw stopped me cold. The houses weren't just lit, they were pulsing. The glow brightened and dimmed in rhythm, like a heartbeat. Every porch bulb blinked in unison, and through the fog, I saw shapes moving inside some of those abandoned windows. Human silhouettes. At first I thought it was reflection mine maybe, but then one of the figures turned toward me. The nearest porch light flared, and I saw its face clearly enough to know it wasn't any reflection. Its eyes glowed, faint yellow, like old filament wire, and the skin around its mouth cracked open into something that looked like a smile. The radio on my belt screamed with static. Over it, Charlie's voice. Get out of there, now. I ran back into the shack and slammed the door. The walls hummed like a hive. The power meters spun faster than I'd ever seen. The needles read. When I tried the kill switch again, it sparked blue-white, almost blinding. The smell of burning ozone filled the air. Then the lights outside went out all at once. Total darkness. I waited, counting heartbeats, listening to the wires settle. Then something tapped on the metal door. 3 times. Slow. Deliberate. The handle twitched once, like someone trying it gently. I turned my flashlight toward the door. The steel rippled faintly, like heat distortion. For a moment, I saw something outlined in that ripplearm's shoulders, head-like static, caught in solid form. Then it faded. The line monitor flickered back to life on its own. New reading, load transferred, source unknown. I packed my gear and left before sunrise. Back at the operations center, Charlie listened to the report without interrupting. Then he asked, "You sure every light went off?" I said yes. He stared out the window for a long time before Charlie didn't say much after that. He just rubbed his temples and told me to get some rest. But I noticed something strange before I left the office. The control board still showed active current flow to Fort Yukon, not high enough to trigger alarms. Just a low, steady draw like something was still running out there. The town was supposed to be dark. I couldn't stop thinking about it. So the next night, I pulled the old voltage logs. Every surge had occurred at exactly 2:14 a.m., lasting 11 seconds each time. The pattern repeated for 4 nights before the blackout. That kind of consistency isn't random, it's deliberate. I decided to drive back out alone. Charlie didn't need to know. The road north was empty, just miles of snow and frozen silence. The power poles along the highway looked like black ribs sticking out of the ground. Every few miles, My truck radio buzzed with faint interference low tones, almost melodic. I switched it off. When I reached Fort Yukon, the sky was clear and cold enough to make the stars look carved into the air. The town was dark again, except for one house on the far side of the road. A single porch light glowed, dim but steady. I checked the map. It belonged to the Kalka residence. That place had been condemned 2 winters ago. The line running to it was live. I followed it across the snow, the faint hum rising under my boots. The door of the house was open. Inside smelled like copper and dust. The furniture was gone, replaced by wires, hundreds of them threaded through the walls, coiling along the ceiling, feeding into a single junction box in the living room. The box pulsed faintly, glowing from inside like a breathing ember. I crouched down, listening. Beneath the hum, I heard whispers, soft and fragmented, like radio chatter, words half-formed, repeating phrases from old work transmissions. Some of them were mine. The voltmeter on my belt began to spike wildly. The air in the room felt charged, every hair on my arm standing on end. I reached for the main disconnect on the wall, but the wires twitched away from my hand, recoiling like something alive. Then the light in the box flared. A human silhouette formed inside it, like a body made from glass filled with molten wire. It flickered in and out, its shape flickering with the current. When it moved, the floor vibrated under me. "Who's there?" I shouted. The thing tilted its head. Its mouth opened, but instead of sound, I heard the low hum of the grid amplified until my teeth hurt. Behind it, every other bulb in the house flared to life white hot, buzzing in perfect unison. Then it spoke, not through its mouth, but through the walls. The voice came from every outlet, every filament. "You never shut it off." The floorboards smoked beneath me. The junction box pulsed again, brighter, and the hum shifted tone, cycling upward like it was charging. I backed out into the snow. But the wires followed thin black cords, sliding through the doorway like tendrils. They stopped at the threshold, twitching, hissing faintly like static on an open channel. Then every light in town came on again. I could see the entire main street lit perfectly, houses glowing, windows bright, power poles gleaming like hot metal. The lights didn't flicker this time. They throbbed, slow and steady, as if the whole grid was breathing. My truck radio crackled, loud and sudden. Charlie's voice came through. "What the hell did you do?" "We just lost feed control every line, north of Hughes, reroute." I tried to respond, but the mic sizzled in my hand. Sparks leaped from the dashboard. The headlights dimmed, then glowed brighter than I'd ever seen. The truck engine idled higher on its own, rumbling like it wanted to move. I jumped out, stumbling into the snow. The power lines above me vibrated, humming in harmony with that same pulse. It wasn't random current anymore, it was a signal, and every transformer, every junction, was answering back. Then the lights started shutting off, one by one, not randomly, but in sequence, flowing outward from the Kalka house like a wave. When the last one went dark, the entire town fell silent. The air didn't feel empty though. It felt crowded, like something was still moving through it, invisible, testing its reach. Then my radio came alive again, not Charlie this time. My own voice. Load transferred source, unknown. Looked back, toward the Kalka house, and through the dead porch light, I could still see that faint red glow pulsing behind the wall, steady, patient, waiting for the next surge. When I got back to the operations center, the lights were flickering, even there hundreds of miles south. Dispatch said Fort Yukon had gone completely off-grid at 2:37 a.m., right after the surge I'd seen. But no one could explain why the power demand didn't drop. It stayed constant, steady as a heartbeat. Charlie cornered me in the hallway. "You didn't touch anything, right? No relay reset, no bypass." I shook my head. "I killed the breakers myself." "The system came back on anyway." He stared for a long moment, then lowered his voice. "This isn't the first time, you know. We've had towns like that before, up north, off the books. Grid says they're dark, but the load never stops. I didn't want to believe him, but the way he said it, the quiet certainty made my stomach turn. I stayed after hours, pulling archived voltage logs. Fort Yukon wasn't the only anomaly. There were 6 other dead towns across the northern network, all showing identical rhythmic pulses recorded over decades. Every 10 or 11 years, the signal resurfaced for a few days, then vanished again. The earliest file dated back to 1962. Same reading. Same phrase, printed at the bottom. Load, transferred, source unknown. I traced the coordinates from that first incident. They didn't lead to Fort Yukon, they led beneath it, roughly 400 meters down, somewhere below the frost line. I borrowed a portable ground sensor and went back one last time. The drive was endless. The night air, colder than I'd ever felt. By the time I reached the substation, everything looked dead again. No lights, no hum, just snow falling silently over the wires. The main junction box was sealed with frost, but when I pried it open, the temperature gauge inside read 43 degrees Fahrenheit, impossible for that depth of winter. The cables inside were trembling slightly, not from wind, from something moving inside them. The ground sensor picked up a vibration pattern, faint, regular, unmistakably biological. Heart rate, 48 beats per minute. I laughed without meaning, too thin, nervous. Impossible, I said aloud, but the reading didn't change. I drove a soil probe into the permafrost beside the shack. At 3 feet, resistance. At 5, a hollow gap. The meter spiked, emitting a long, low tone that vibrated through my gloves. Then the power came back on. Every bulb in town, every floodlight at the airstrip, every street lamp that hadn't worked in decades, they all lit up together. The snow reflected, the light so bright, it looked like daylight. And then I heard voices, hundreds of them, faint but layered through the hum of the lines. Male, female, old, young, each speaking in fragments: please, warnings, orders, laughter. It wasn't random noise. It was memory. The grid was playing back what it had stored. The relay meters began spinning wildly again. A shape formed in the frost on the inside of the shack wall, a handprint, pressed from within the metal, leaving behind a faint glow like heat through steel. Then my own voice joined the chorus.